Okay, we're going to talk about a biblical story that I think is more of an analogy of what our world is today. Uh, uh, Isaac was an older man, couldn't have children. Rebecca, he was married to Rebecca, and he prayed to God, and Rebecca conceived, and in her womb she had two children. And this says that the two children had struggled together inside her womb, and she couldn't understand, so she asked God, and He says, "What you have in your womb are two nations, two manner of people, two nations, meaning two different group of people, uh, two very different manner of people. They're very different in how they live life, and one will be mightier than the other." Stronger than the other, more powerful, and the elder shall serve the younger. Okay, and again, I think this is more of an analogy of the world that God created. Okay, meaning when I look at this, Esau, to me, as we go forward, Esau's born first. He's red. He has hair all over. Jacob comes out grabbing Esau's heel, trying to trip him up, basically. And Esau was a cunning hunter and lived in the fields. Jacob was a plain man who dwelt in the tents. He preferred the comfort of life. Okay, and thus subsequently, he's said to have gone to the father, tricked him into giving him his inheritance, and was able to live the easy life, much like we do, versus the Bigfoot, which live in the forest and live a much more difficult life to a certain extent. Um, as far as eating and surviving. Um, so anyway, I think this is an analogy of sorts. I really don't know that a Bigfoot came out of a womb of just a normal woman with, another normal being, but I truly believe that a lot of these things are more analogies or hints of how God created the world. And the reason I say that is what I'm going to get into is we're going to go back into history and read some things that many people don't realize are out there, that speak to this history that I just explained here. Okay, but first, before I go on, I want to explain Esau. The name was said to be rooted either in Arabic, a thigh, to be covered with hair, or a thigh. A thigh, I'm going to emphasize that because that's something similar is going to come up here soon, and that's hairy. Okay, and then of course it also mentions about Enkidu, who is a Babylonian hero whose hairy body is similar to Esau, and who also lived among the animals in the forest. Okay, so this is a Babylonian story, if you will, and it talks about basically a Bigfoot. So again, this speaks to the fact that God created these two types of man. The Bigfoot that are hairy and they have all their capabilities, and they're the neutralizer to the more cunning man who's the deceiver, ambusher. One thing I didn't mention again is the name Jacob, which I'll go into here, means deceiver and ambusher. That name is often used for those who ambush an unsuspecting party. That's going to be key as we go forward with what I'm going to talk about is the future between these two, and that there is a past history that's very similar, and that's why I believe that God created the two, and one neutralizes the negative energy of the other. Okay, and we'll talk about that later, and I'll also talk about how the rabbi's commentary in talking about these two names, I find it kind of ironic how he says, hey, it's so funny how the Jacob, the quiet homebody, hunts down and ambushes his brother Esau. I find that very interesting, and the reason I find that interesting is because there is a history, but it's hidden from us, and these other people that consider themselves to be a more supreme crowd of beings hoard that for themselves and their children, while they give the serfs, not all the history or all the wrong history, really. So anyway, so I wanted to talk about this, the naming conventions, what they mean, and the fact that God created these two to live alongside one another, but not within, integrated for a reason. Okay, and we'll go on part 2 and discuss that.